The NFL is planning to play this fall. That's our hope, and that's our planning to date. We can help our country heal. We can help bring our communities together. We can provide hope. We can provide a distraction from the everyday issues and show people that there is a future out there and that we're all going to be part of that.
That's the first we've seen and heard directly from Roger Goodell since the pandemic began last month, and it popped up kind of without much fanfare on the NFL's Instagram account, Peter. And I think it's useful at times like this to hear from people like Roger Goodell, the guy who runs the most popular sport in America. There are a lot of impressionable people out there. They're getting mixed messages, and to the extent that you can provide a message of hope, a message of positivity, I think it's very important, and I'm glad that Roger Goodell did it. But every time I hear the NFL is planning to play, I understand that we want to project optimism and hope. I just think the more accurate statement is we're planning for every possible scenario. And I hope they are. I hope they aren't simply planning to play, but planning for everything that can happen, because one thing we've learned over the past month, anything can happen, and anything has happened in the past 4 weeks.
Well, Mike, we're all trying to, divine what exactly is going to happen going into the future. And so, and I think we're all somewhat, anyway, we're all these days at least kind of news junkies. And so the other night I was watching the PBS NewsHour, Judy Woodruff, and she has an interview with Bill Gates. And Bill Gates obviously has got a lot of experience with his philanthropy in Africa and around the world with vaccines. He's basically become an expert in this field. And he said in so many words that when Judy Woodruff asked him about big gatherings of people and conventions or stadiums, and Bill Gates said essentially that, he does not think it's a very good idea until there is a vaccine. And so if you take that a step further, I don't hear anybody saying, yep, by November we'll have a vaccine. I mean, and again, all I'm doing is trying to spitball just like we all are. And sometimes that's a little bit dangerous. But my feeling is that it's unrealistic to think that, on September 10th, when the Kansas City Chiefs, if the Kansas City Chiefs open the season at Arrowhead Stadium, it's unrealistic to not even consider that there might not be fans in the stands. And I've talked to a few players this week who've openly talked about the fact that we're probably going to play some games without fans in the stands. And so I think the sooner people start to kind of wrap their head around that, I think the better and the more realistic it will be for people trying to anticipate the future.
I agree with you completely. And the problem is when you speak like that, there are people who get riled up and say you're being an alarmist, you're being unrealistic. Well, we're being realistic, and we don't want to create false hope. There's nothing wrong with hope, but I think it's detrimental to fill people's heads up with ideas that don't come to fruition, because then, Peter, it's just one disappointment after another. Anybody who was looking forward to watching UFC 249 finds out last night that's not going to happen. People looking forward to seeing baseball in June, they're going to be disappointed if they find out that's not going to happen. So I think the hope needs to be realistic, and everyone needs to be pragmatic, and it is a very simple chain of logic. It's going to be impossible to get back to where we were without a vaccine for this virus, period. And the big concern, as we alluded to last segment, wave 2, wave 3. The news last night told me that wave 3 of the Spanish flu was the worst wave, that we thought we were over it twice, and people let their guard down, and it came back worse the third time. So until there's a vaccine, I agree with you. The idea of full stadiums or anyone in stadiums seems incomprehensible. But it's still important for the people who run our private institutions to provide messages of hope. And I was inspired by the way that Roger Goodell closed his comments that emerged earlier this week. Listen to what Roger Goodell had to say and come to your own conclusion as to whether or not you find it inspiring. I do.
We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. We're going to get through this as a country and as a world, and that this is something that we're going to overcome. And people should keep that hope, because we're going to get back to doing the things that we were doing, and hopefully creating a great future for so many people. And I hope everyone stays involved and does what's best in our communities in the short term, but more importantly, keeps focusing on the future, because it's going to be a bright future for us.
See, it's simple to deliver that message, but it's also very important. It's very powerful, because we're living in this Groundhog Day existence where every morning I Got You, Babe is playing at 6 a.m. and we slammed our hand on the clock, and here we go with another day, and we have no idea when this is going to end. And it's important to hear from people just that simple, very basic, but very pure and true message that we are going to find a way through this, that it is going to get back to normal at some point. However long it takes, we're climbing that mountain, Peter, 1 inch at a time, and we have no idea where the top is. But when you hear messages like that from people of high position, high level of trust, and yeah, they boo him at the draft, that's sport, but Roger Goodell is still the guy who is at the very top of the NFL pyramid, that I think is helpful to people. And those little messages can help people get through one day, a rough day, a bad day. You hear something like that, it gets you through that bad day. So I encourage him and others in positions like that to keep putting those messages out there, to keep us all moving in the direction that we all need to be moving.
Yeah, and Mike, look, I mean, I think that everybody should basically keep their eye on the prize, and the prize being getting back to a normal life. And if you keep your eye on the prize about getting back to a normal life, then that means you're not going to be careless, and you're not going to say, well, I'm going to jump over this fence and me and 8 buddies are going to go play basketball. It's interesting. Yesterday I was talking to Chris Harris Jr., the new cornerback of the Los Angeles Chargers. Last year, his workout routine in Texas, where he lives in Dallas, was his trainer had about 20 to 25 people who every day would go, they do some lifting, they do some drills, they'd be on a football field in Dallas. So this year, what they've done, Chris Harris Jr. said, it sort of looks like a field day, around. He said, we have 5 guys who don't come close to each other. And the way the routine is, they all are on different stuff, which is obviously cleaned off and all that. And so all of this stuff is done trying to keep in mind, we are getting ready, okay? But we're getting ready in a different way than we ever have before. And that is the thing to keep in mind, okay? There are ways to do some of this stuff that you've always done, but to do it in a more careful way and to not just be careless. So to me, you can keep your eye on the prize, getting back to a normal life. And you know what? Some of the new normal is not going to be what it used to be. I keep thinking to myself, if I could sign right now for a 12-game season without a bye that starts on October 18th, and maybe for either part or all the year there are no fans in the stands, quite honestly, I'd sign for that right now. Because to me, what it means is that you will play the NFL season in some degree of regularity. You might not have fans in the stands, but what is the strength of the National Football League for its consumers? The televised product. And I know everybody's going to say, oh my God, it won't be the same at Arrowhead Stadium without the sea of red. Well, of course it won't. But we're not the same either. And you just have to say to yourself, okay, could we have 70% of the enjoyment? And the fans are not there. I'd rather have 70% of the enjoyment than not have games.
Yeah, and the bottom line is if those games have to proceed without fans present, that means we're going to still be subject to some degree of the restrictions that are keeping us at home, and we're going to need those games. We're going to want those games. We're going to want that thing we can look forward to at the end of each week to see our favorite team play, to have our fantasy team in action, whatever the case may be. It's something that breaks up that notion that every day is the same, one day after the other. Like I said earlier, Bill Murray slamming his hand on the clock when Sonny and Cher are singing that song at 6 a.m. in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. We can only take so much of that. We need things to look forward to.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.